Millions hailed Sid Luckman as a god on the field, leading the Chicago Bears to glory. But little did they know, every accurate pass, every glorious victory was made under the weight of a terrible secret, a tragedy involving his own father, who lived in the shadows while his son shone most brightly. This story will reveal the silent burden behind a legend. To understand the impossible pressures that forged Sid Luckman, you must travel back in time to the vibrant, chaotic, and fiercely aspirational world of early 20th century Brooklyn. This was not the trendy, artisanal Brooklyn of today. This was a borough of crowded tenements and clattering pushcarts, a sprawling, energetic, and often unforgiving melting pot that served as the first difficult chapter of the American dream for millions of new arrivals. Sidney Luckman was born in 1916 into the very heart of this world. His parents, Meyer and Eva Luckman, were Jewish immigrants who had fled Germany, joining a massive wave of humanity seeking refuge and opportunity on the shores of the New World. They settled in a crowded Brooklyn neighborhood like Brownsville, a place teeming with the sounds of Yiddish and Italian, the smells of street food and industry, a community bound together by shared hopes and common struggles. The immigrant experience was a daily study in contrast. The promise of a better life was real and tangible, but so was the grinding reality of poverty, the sting of prejudice, and the constant draining struggle to assimilate into American life without losing the traditions of the old world. For a young Jewish boy like Sid, life was shaped by these powerful competing forces. In the home, there was a deep, culturally ingrained emphasis on family, community, and above all, education. But on the streets, another harsher education was taking place. This was the era of Prohibition and its violent aftermath, a time when the lines between legitimate business and the criminal underworld were often perilously thin. Organized crime figures, men like Meyer Lansky and Bugsy Siegel, who emerged from these same Jewish neighborhoods, cast a long and dangerously alluring shadow, offering a faster, if more treacherous path to the wealth and status that the American dream promised. It was in this high-stakes environment that Meyer Luckman tried to carve out a life. He was a trucker, a man who worked with his hands, constantly hustling, always looking for an angle to provide for his wife and their 5 children. By all accounts, he was a proud, if sometimes volatile father who desperately wanted his children to have a better, easier life than his own. He saw a special spark in his son, Sid. The boy was a natural athlete, gifted with a powerful arm and an intuitive grace. For Meyer, Sid's talent was more than a source of pride. It was a ticket out of the tenements, a ticket to a university, a ticket into the mainstream of American life where the name Luckman would mean something. At the same time, the sport that would become Sid's salvation was undergoing its own painful evolution. Professional football in the 1920s and early 30s was a brutal, almost primitive affair. The dominant offensive formation was the single wing, a grinding, run-heavy system where the quarterback was often little more than a blocking back. The forward pass was a clumsy afterthought, an act of desperation. The game was won and lost in the muddy, bloody trenches by hulking linemen and tough battering ram runners. But a few forward-thinking coaches were beginning to dream of a more sophisticated, wide-open game, a kind of chess match on grass, a game that would require a new kind of leader under center. They were waiting, though they didn't know it yet, for a player with the arm to make any throw, the intelligence to outwit any defense, and the poise to stand tall in the face of chaos. They were waiting for Sid Luckman, but before he could revolutionize a sport, his entire world and the very meaning of his family's name would be shattered by a single, desperate, and violent act. By the fall of 1935, Sid Luckman was a bona fide New York City celebrity. He was the star quarterback at the prestigious Erasmus Hall High School in Brooklyn, a local hero whose exploits filled the sports pages of the city's many newspapers. He was known for his cannon arm, his uncanny accuracy, and a preternatural calm in the pocket that belied his youth. A bright future seemed not just possible, but preordained. His father, Meyer, was his most vocal and ardent supporter, a constant presence on the sidelines, his pride in his son's achievements visible to all. But behind this idyllic picture of immigrant success, a dark and desperate drama was unfolding. Meyer Luckman was in serious financial trouble. He had entered into a business partnership with his own brother-in-law, Morris Stephen, his wife Eva's brother. The business was failing, and the relationship had disintegrated into a toxic mix of mounting debts and bitter accusations. The pressure on Meyer, a man described by those who knew him as having a proud and dangerously volatile temper, was becoming unbearable. On a late summer day, the simmering feud reached its tragic conclusion. Meyer and Morris Stephen had a final heated confrontation at the trucking depot. It ended in an act of shocking violence. Meyer Luckman, in a fit of rage and desperation, killed his brother-in-law. The details were grim, and the act was undeniable. He was quickly arrested and charged with first-degree murder. For 18-year-old Sid Luckman, the news was a cataclysm that ripped his world apart. One moment, he was a celebrated athlete, the pride of his family and his community. The next, he was the son of an accused murderer. The family name, the name he had worked so hard to bring honor to on the football field, was now splashed across the sensationalist front pages of the New York Daily News, forever linked to a sordid and brutal crime. The shame was a physical blow. The whispers in the school hallways, the sidelong glances from neighbors, the sudden chilling change in the way people looked at him. It was a crushing, suffocating burden for a young man to bear. The trial was a media circus. Meyer Luckman's defense team argued that the act was one of self-defense, a struggle that had gone horribly wrong. But the prosecution painted a picture of a premeditated act born of financial desperation. The jury sided with the prosecution. Meyer was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 20 years to life in the infamous Sing Sing Correctional Facility, a grim fortress looming over the Hudson River. The day the prison gates clanged shut behind his father, Sid Luckman's youth came to an abrupt and brutal end. He was no longer a carefree athlete. He was by necessity the new patriarch of a shamed and broken family, the man solely responsible for the welfare of his distraught mother and his younger siblings. The weight of this new reality could have easily destroyed him. Many young men would have crumbled, surrendering to the shame, the anger, and the hopelessness. But Sid made a conscious, deliberate choice. He would not allow his father's crime to be the final chapter in the Luckman family story. He would carry the burden, but he would carry it in silence, burying it deep within himself. He resolved with a quiet and grim determination to use his God-given athletic talent not just for his own ambition, but as a shield to protect his family. He would build a new legacy for the Luckman name, one so bright and so honorable that it would, he hoped, cast the darkness into shadow. This private vow, forged in the crucible of a very public tragedy, would become the silent, powerful engine that drove the rest of his extraordinary life. His first major decision reflected this newfound resolve. As one of the most sought-after high school recruits in the nation, he was courted by football powerhouses like Notre Dame and Ohio State. But his mother, Eva, a woman of incredible fortitude, insisted on two things: that he stay close to home to help her, and that he receive an education that would last long after his football career was over. So, Sid made a stunning choice. He turned down the football factories and accepted a scholarship to Columbia University, an Ivy League institution in New York City. Columbia was world-renowned for its academics, but its football program was a perennial laughingstock. It was a choice that prioritized family duty and long-term security over immediate athletic glory. At Columbia, he could be a student, a son who could take the subway home to his mother, and a football player, in that order. It was here that he would perfect the art of compartmentalization, the psychological skill that would become his greatest and most necessary asset. On the outside, he was just another college student. On the inside, he was carrying a secret he would rarely, if ever, speak of again for the rest of his life. Sid Luckman's 4 years at Columbia University were a symphony of individual brilliance played against a backdrop of collective failure. He was a diamond on a team of jagged stones. Week after week, he put on a dazzling display of quarterbacking, his skills a quantum leap beyond anyone else in the Ivy League. He could throw a football with the power of a howitzer and the accuracy of a surgeon, leading desperate, thrilling comeback attempts and single-handedly keeping his outmatched team in games they had no right to be in. He became a New York City phenomenon, the pride of Columbia, a brilliant soloist in a struggling tone-deaf orchestra. But more impressive than his physical talent was his leadership. His teammates, who knew they were often outclassed, revered him for his quiet confidence and his almost eerie poise. He never yelled, never showed frustration, never panicked, even as the losses piled up. He simply went about his business, executing his role with a calm, methodical precision that was almost unnerving. This was the first public exhibition of the trait that would define his professional career, his unshakable grace under pressure. What no one could possibly know was that this grace was not an innate gift. It was a psychological armor, forged, hardened, and perfected in the fires of his family's private tragedy. Compared to the real-world pressure of keeping a shamed family afloat, a third and long situation in a football game must have seemed like child's play. Despite Columbia's dismal win-loss record, Luckman's individual genius did not go unnoticed. Nearly 1,000 miles away in Chicago, a man named George Halas was watching, and he was captivated. Halas, the pugnacious owner and coach of the Bears, was a football visionary, a man perpetually searching for the sport's next evolutionary leap. He was tired of the slow, predictable, 3 yards in a cloud of dust game that dominated the NFL. He had become a disciple of a new, radical offensive system, a variation of the T formation being run by Coach Clark Shaughnessy at Stanford. It was a complex, pass-oriented system that made the quarterback the central, pivotal figure of the entire offense. It was a system that required a new kind of quarterback, not just a strong-arm thrower, but a brilliant field general, a player who could process information, read complex defenses, and lead with cold, calculating intelligence. In the poised Ivy League quarterback on a losing team, Halas saw the perfect man to run his revolutionary offense. He became obsessed. He looked past Columbia's terrible record and saw the unflappable poise, the rifle arm, and the sharp, analytical mind. In the 1939 NFL Draft, George Halas stunned the football world by making Sid Luckman the 2nd overall pick. Luckman was deeply ambivalent. He had very little interest in playing professional football, a sport he saw as brutal and financially unstable. His plan was to graduate from Columbia and join his family's modest trucking business, providing a steady, reliable income for his mother and siblings. He saw it as the responsible, honorable choice. But Halas was a force of nature. He was relentless. He flew to New York to meet with Sid in person, refusing to take no for an answer. In a now legendary meeting, Halas didn't just offer Luckman a contract. He offered him a glimpse of the future. He spread diagrams of the T formation on the floor of a hotel room, passionately and urgently explaining how Sid wouldn't just be a player, he would be the brain and the arm of the most sophisticated offense ever designed. He appealed to Sid's intellect, and then he appealed to his sense of duty, offering him a guaranteed contract for $5,500, a sum that could provide real security for his family. Intrigued by the intellectual challenge of the new offense, and swayed by Halas's vision and the financial stability it offered, Luckman agreed. He reported to the Chicago Bears training camp in 1939, a quiet, scholarly, and serious young man from Brooklyn, about to become the test pilot for a football revolution. The transition was arduous. The T formation was incredibly complex with hundreds of plays, intricate footwork, precise timing, and a reliance on deception and misdirection that was alien to most players. Luckman spent countless hours in chalk talk sessions with Halas, memorizing the playbook, studying defensive tendencies, becoming a meticulous student of the game. His new teammates, a collection of hardened, grizzled veterans of the old school, were deeply skeptical of this new, fancy system and their quiet, intellectual, Ivy League quarterback. But they soon witnessed his undeniable talent. And more importantly, they saw his quiet leadership and his unmatched work ethic. He didn't lead with fiery speeches. He led by example with his flawless preparation and his unshakable calm. By his second season in 1940, Sid Luckman had achieved a deep mastery of the T formation, and the Chicago Bears were about to unleash a storm that would change the National Football League forever. The 1940 season culminated in one of the most iconic, brutal, and consequential games in the history of American sports. The Chicago Bears, having mastered their revolutionary offense, were set to face the powerful Washington Redskins for the NFL championship. The game was thick with bad blood. Just a few weeks earlier, in a regular season matchup, the Redskins had beaten the Bears in a close, controversial 7-3 game. After that victory, the Redskins' famously arrogant owner George Preston Marshall publicly taunted the Bears, calling them crybabies, quitters, and a first-half team. George Halas, a master motivator, seized on those words. He plastered the newspaper clippings all over the Bears' locker room. He read them aloud to his team every single day. By the time the championship game kicked off on a cold December day in Washington, D.C., his team was a coiled spring of controlled fury and righteous indignation. But it was Sid Luckman's cold, calculating, and flawless execution of the T formation that turned that motivation into a historic, systematic annihilation. From the very first offensive series, the Redskins were utterly, hopelessly bewildered. The Bears' offense was a symphony of constant motion, elaborate fakes, and dizzying deception. And Sid Luckman was the brilliant, unruffled conductor. He would bring his team to the line of scrimmage, calmly survey the defense, and then, with a subtle verbal cue or a quick shift, change the play to perfectly exploit the weakness he saw. On the second play from scrimmage, he executed a perfect play-action fake, freezing the Redskins linebackers, and lofted a pass to a wide-open Bill Osmanski for a 68-yard touchdown. It was a beautiful surgical strike. It was also just the beginning of the nightmare. The Bears scored again and again and then again. The points came in a relentless, merciless torrent. They scored on long runs made possible by Luckman's fakes. They scored on short, precision passes. They scored on long, arching bombs. Then, the defense joined the massacre, intercepting passes and returning them for touchdowns. The T formation, with its intricate misdirection and its multiple receiving options, was something Washington had never seen before. Their proud, tough defense was completely paralyzed, always a step behind, constantly fooled by Luckman's brilliant cerebral orchestration of the chaos. By halftime, the game was a historic blowout. In the second half, it became a legend. The scoring was so incessant that the game officials, who were running out of official NFL footballs, reportedly went to Coach Hollis on the sideline and pleaded with him to have his team stop kicking extra points because they were losing too many balls to the crowd. The final score was so lopsided, so utterly unbelievable, that it looked like a typographical error. Chicago Bears 73, Washington Redskins 0. It remains to this day the most lopsided victory in the history of the National Football League. The 73-0 game was more than just a championship. It was a paradigm shift. It was the public execution of the old brute force style of football and the spectacular televised birth of the modern strategic game. It proved, beyond any shadow of a doubt, the superiority of the T formation and forever established the quarterback as the most important, most cerebral position on the field. And it catapulted Sid Luckman into the stratosphere of American superstardom. He had become the face of a new era of football, the first truly great modern quarterback. This was the beginning of a dynasty. Over the next decade, with the unflappable Luckman at the helm, the Chicago Bears would become the most dominant and feared team in the NFL. They played in 5 NFL championship games and won 4 of them. Luckman's individual accolades piled up. He was named the league's most valuable player in 1943. In one legendary game, he threw for a record-setting 7 touchdowns. He was the undisputed king of his sport. And yet, through all the championships, the ticker tape parades, and the deafening adulation, he remained the same quiet, humble, and intensely private man he had always been. He never, ever spoke of his father. The secret remained locked away, a ghost in the machine of his success. In 1942, when he enlisted in the U.S. Merchant Marine to serve his country during the World War II, he did something small but deeply revealing. On his official enlistment papers, when asked for his father's name, he did not write Meyer. He wrote Martin. It was a quiet, heartbreaking act of a son desperately trying to create even a sliver of distance from a pain and a shame that would never truly go away. He would serve his country with honor, ferrying vital supplies across the dangerous, U-boat-infested waters of the Atlantic, often flying back to the United States on weekends to lead the Bears to victory before returning to his post. He was in every conceivable sense living a remarkable double life, the celebrated public hero and the silent, dutiful carrier of a family's secret shame. The story of Sid Luckman is impossible to tell without attempting to understand the profound, almost dizzying duality of his existence. On the football field, he was a portrait of serene confidence and intellectual command. His teammates, who revered him, nicknamed him the Master. Hall of Fame lineman Bulldog Turner once said, "When Sid stepped into the huddle, you just felt like everything was going to be okay. He never panicked, ever. The worse the situation, the calmer he got." George McAfee, a star running back for the Bears, recalled, "He was the smartest football player I ever knew. It was like he was playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. He saw things on the field nobody else saw." This unwavering, almost unnatural composure is what makes his personal story so remarkable and so poignant. How could a man carrying such a heavy, ever-present emotional burden project such an aura of absolute, unshakable control? This is perhaps the central, defining mystery of Sid Luckman. The answer seems to lie in his incredible, highly developed capacity for compartmentalization. The football field became his sanctuary, a structured, logical world where the messy, painful chaos of his family life could be held at bay. In the huddle, There was only the pure logic of the game, the geometry of the defense, the precise, unemotional execution of a well-designed play. It was a world he could control, a stark and welcome contrast to the world off the field, where he was powerless to change the devastating events of the past. The primary controversy of his life was, in fact, the secret itself, and the conspiracy of silence that surrounded it. In today's 24/7 hyper-intrusive media landscape, a story like that would be impossible to contain. It would be a relentless, career-defining scandal. But in the 1930s and 40s, there was a different unwritten code of conduct among many sports writers. It is widely believed that many in the New York and Chicago press corps knew the tragic story of Luckman's father, but a remarkable unspoken wall of silence protected him. They saw a young man of unimpeachable character, a quiet, dignified person who was dealing with an impossible situation, and they made a collective, tacit decision to let the story lie. They chose to judge him for the man he was, not for the sins of his father. George Halas and the entire Bears organization also played a major role, fiercely guarding their star quarterback's privacy. This protection allowed Sid to do what he felt he must do: provide for his family and painstakingly build a new, honorable legacy for the Luckman name. He was a devoted son. He sent a significant portion of his NFL salary home to his mother, ensuring she and his siblings were always cared for. And, in a quiet, profound act of forgiveness and filial duty, he did not abandon his father. He would discreetly visit Meyer in Sing Sing, maintaining a relationship despite the prison walls and the vast chasm that now separated their lives. Finally, in 1945, after serving 10 years of his sentence, Meyer Luckman was granted parole. The quiet, behind-the-scenes lobbying and character testimonials from his son, by now one of the most famous and respected athletes in America, almost certainly played a significant role in the parole board's decision. Meyer was released and lived the rest of his life in quiet obscurity, his debt to society paid. The family was, in a sense, made whole again, though the deep, invisible scars of the tragedy would always remain. This complex, painful, and deeply private family dynamic is the ultimate key to understanding Sid Luckman. His relentless drive was not just for championships or for personal glory. His drive was for a kind of redemption, not for himself, for he had done nothing wrong, but for his family name. Every perfectly thrown spiral, every brilliant audible at the line, every championship trophy hoisted in the air was a small, deliberate act of reclamation. It was his way of overriding the public story of shame with a new, indelible story of honor. He retired from football in 1950 at the age of 34, his mission accomplished and his legacy secure. He had thrown for over 14,000 yards and 137 touchdowns, numbers that were astronomical for his era. But more than the numbers, he had changed the very nature of what a quarterback could be. He had proven that a quarterback could be, and indeed should be, the smartest, most prepared, and most poised leader on the field. The historical significance of Sid Luckman extends far beyond the 4 championships he won for the city of Chicago. He stands as a pivotal, revolutionary figure in the century-long evolution of American football. He was the prototype, the patient zero for the modern cerebral pocket-passing quarterback. Before Luckman, the position was often an afterthought. After Luckman, it became the most glamorous, most complex, and most important position in all of team sports. His brilliant mastery of the T formation dragged the NFL, kicking and screaming, into its modern era. The offensive concepts he and Halas perfected, the man in motion to diagnose defensive coverages, the devastating play-action pass, the quarterback as an on-field coach with the power to change plays at the line, are now fundamental, bedrock building blocks of every offensive system, from Friday night high school games to the Super Bowl. Every time a modern quarterback like Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, or Patrick Mahomes steps to the line and surgically deconstructs a defense with their mind before the snap, they are operating in the house that Sid Luckman helped build. He was, of course, inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1965. His place among the game's immortals never in any doubt. But his impact also resonated powerfully beyond the football field, particularly within the American Jewish community. In an era when anti-Semitism was still a palpable and ugly force in American and international life, Sid Luckman was an unapologetic and widely admired Jewish hero. He quietly but decisively shattered stereotypes, proving that a Jewish athlete could be the toughest, smartest, and most successful leader in America's most brutal sport. For a generation of Jewish Americans, he became a powerful and important symbol of assimilation and achievement. After his football career, he seamlessly transitioned into the business world, becoming a highly successful executive for a manufacturing company. He channeled the same intelligence, meticulous preparation, and quiet confidence that made him a great quarterback into his second career. He remained a devoted family man, married to his wife Estelle for nearly 60 years, and was fiercely protective of his privacy to the very end. He had successfully built the wall he had set out to build all those years ago as a teenager, protecting his family and his own peace of mind from the long, dark shadow of the past. The death of Sid Luckman in 1998 brought to an end one of the greatest and most moving stories in sport. For the fans who followed him, it was not the passing of a distant legend, but the loss of a man of integrity who had brought glory to their city. His true legacy lies not in his 73 points in the 1940 Grand Final, but in the quiet strength he displayed throughout his life. His is a story of filial piety, of a son who used his on-field glory to heal wounds and restore honor to his family. Ultimately, he will be remembered not just for changing American football, but for redefining what it means to be a good man.